Now let's talk about some samples of the exhibition hall, introducing its characteristics. The content of our section is mainly about sheet metal cutting, thin tube cutting, showroom, stainless steel cutting, carbon steel precision cutting, and thin tube precision cutting, or various materials of conventional cutting samples, and finally, a bicycle frame sample. Here, all of us have an assignment. Organize language, introduce to our customers one of our sample features, application cases, and reference customers. Let's talk about the sheet metal cutting sample first. What is the main point of our sample here? When we see this sample, we can think of related applications. For example, these scissors with serrated teeth. The first step is to use this mold to cast a simple shape. Then, second is to use the laser cutting tool on the edge of the blade. Do you know where the processing difficulty is? The first is that the two blades must to be closed seamlessly, because only if scissors open and close, then you can cut things. And the second is that the thickness of the blade changes from 2 to 4 millimeters. So we can tell the story behind this sample to customers. There are about 300,000 of these scissors to be cut. The customer looked for some of the same equipment in the Yangjiang market for testing. Neither of them succeeded. What is the reason for the failure? Because this tooth-shaped cutting may have problems like curved lines, obtuse angle, burning angle, or other situations. Secondly, the saw teeth may not be closed seamlessly. There are certain gaps and dislocations. But finally, our user takes orders, they deliver goods on time perfectly. So we need to explain to customer that our company's machines are stable and reliable, with good cutting accuracy. So finally, when we describe samples, show some reference videos to customers. We have various samples. For example, like this one. It is 8 millimeter carbon steel. It is cut with a GE 3000 watt device. It shows bright surface with medium power cutting, which shows the sharp angle cutting technology. Angle is sharp, straight, clean. Tooth shape is flat, no burning angle, no deformation. Bright surface is tapered to within 0.1 millimeter, which is what we call 10 filaments, and its surface roughness is between 15 and 20 micron. This is a 12 millimeter carbon steel plate cut by GH 6000 watt. It also shows bright surface cutting, continuous cutting, 100 tooth. They are clean, no burning, no deformation. This needs the stability of the equipment, as well as the stability of the laser source. Cutting the bright surface for a long time, what if the laser is not stable enough? What could possibly happen? First, it will have overheat alarm. Second, if the power output is unstable, it may cut terribly when it cuts a certain angle. Look at this one. This is a 20 millimeter thick carbon steel plate cut by GH 10,000 watt equipment. It shows a high power bright surface cutting. The angle is sharp, straight, smooth, no burning, no deformation. This is a 6 millimeter aluminum cut by GH 15,000 watts. It's also a bright surface cutting technology. The cutting edge is nice, smooth, almost no burrs. Aluminum is a little bit special. It can cut with nitrogen, oxygen, and also compressed air. As to the effect, cutting with air will be better because there is still a little bit of oxygen in the air. We use a light cutting gas here. Light cutting gas is a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen in a certain proportion, equivalent to our artificial production of a similar to the air of a gas. And finally, achieve a bright surface cutting effect. The final cutting edge has very little burrs, almost smooth and delicate. This is a 5mm brass cut by GE 3000 wattage. It is characterized by a high-end cutting process. Cutting surface fine, smooth, no burr. What does it mean of a high reflection? Because brass, copper, and aluminum plates, they're all highly reflective material. If the laser power control is not good, or the cutting process is not good, it is likely to lead to an alarm, and even lead to a permanent damage to the laser. So that is anti-high reflective technology. This is a 60mm stainless steel cut with a GH 15,000 watt machine. The technology is thick plate high power cutting. It is the same as the 60mm carbon steel plate in the next page. Here we should mention one point. We do not recommend customers to see thickest limit cutting. For example, like our 15,000 watts, it cuts 60mm thicknesses. Although it can cut, it is very slow cutting speed. Just showing our ability to cut is enough. If the customer has to look at the cutting thickness, it will take a very long time. Generally speaking, for example, when the customer buys 15,000 watts equipment, he would not normally cut that thick. He may cut 30, 40mm. In this way, it cuts with good effect and efficiency. Customers will generally use flame cutting for thick plates. The effect and speed are okay. So in general, high power, we will demonstrate the best thickness rather than the maximum thickness. This is a 1mm stainless steel, coated with a layer of black carbon on the surface. It is cut with a 1000 watt equipment. It is characterized by a large format graphics and text using a laser cutter to fill engraving, clear lines, no double image. The high precision of the engraving shows that the repeated positioning accuracy of our equipment is high. And the energy can be perfectly controlled because the power is between 300 to 400 watts at the time of marking. And the laser is about 0.1mm in diameter when it's focused. So you need to hit that width continuously. We can see that the lines are very straight. There is no individual prominent or bending phenomenon. The repeated positioning accuracy of this machine is relatively high. This one shows the broken cutting technology. Also, 1mm of stainless steel uses 1000 watts laser to cut, which is a complex pattern. And normally, if we are going to cut a complex pattern, we might be able to attach it to keep it from falling, and then we take it down manually. And in this case, we can also use the broken cutting process to cut all the lines on the inside and then cut the figure on the outside. After that, the whole little figure can fall off completely. Avoid laser head collision. One-time completion of cutting. Do not need pick up materials manually. This is a 25 mm carbon steel plate cut out of a spring. It is also cut by a 15,000 watt equipment. It shows one-time complete cutting. The total length is 24 meters. Processing speed is 1 meter per minute. Therefore, the processing time is 24 minutes. During the cutting process, we should not only take into account the guarantee of cutting quality, but also take into account the possibility of poor cutting effect due to overheating of the plate and hot nozzles. Thanks to the cooling and constant temperature control technology of our cutting heads, most of the cutting heads used in the high-power devices on the market are plastic at present, so they are the same. However, we have added an air-cooled and water-cooled technique to the head. So during the long time cutting process, our cutting head will not get worse because of the heat generated or because it's raised up during the cutting process. This is stainless steel, 2 mm stainless steel coated with a layer of gold, and we use a 3000 watt device to cut it, which is made of 7 to 8 pieces of stainless steel stacked together to form a three-dimensional picture. This is a combination of stainless steel 1 mm to 3 mm. The key of its manufacture is precise cutting and debugging. It needs constant debugging to realize the coordination between big and small gears and the optimization of bearings. All we have to do is control one of these pinions, and we can control the opening and closing of this big fan. This is a stainless steel plate cut by GE 3000 watts and welded by handheld welding. The desk lamp has an adjustment function. Whether adjusting the orientation or elevation, it is controllable. So in the production process, we must strictly control the accuracy of each part of the cutting. So finally, in the overall assembly process, the seamless rotation is needed. This sample is made of a 1 mm stainless steel plate and a stainless steel square tube. It is made of GE 3000 watts with TS65 pipe cutting machine, and then a handheld welding machine is added. Because after cutting these complicated shapes, it needs to make a male and female splice with this stainless steel square pipe to make a male and a female splice and make it into an outer frame. The male and female splice is very good, so we need to use a handheld welding, spot welding a few times. It can be perfectly fixed together. No wire filling or full welding, just a spot welding. Final effect is very smooth and beautiful, but also very solid. Then we take a look at one of our thin tube cutting samples. Similarly, we also have a story here. It is made a belt-type retractable guardrail. This kind of guardrail often can be seen in the dining hall in hotels and banks. Its technological step is firstly use the laser to cut the round column shape and its groove. The second step is assembly the base and expansion belt. Then, what's processing difficulties in it? The first notch is high accuracy needed, and the second, this cylindrical column cannot be crushed. You see, it is very thin, only 0.18 mm thick, and could be crushed by hand. So if we use a chalk to clamp it directly, maybe we put it in a circular tube. Take it out, and it becomes a square tube. So here is also a story behind the sample. The customer originally used a saw machine and a punch machine to cut. Less efficient, not safe enough. Then we started the customer using a laser to cut. And customers also selected some equipment for testing in the South China market. Neither of them succeeded. What is the reason for the failure? The cutting accuracy of the first notch is low, or the size is misaligned, resulting in a gap or no installation at all after the rubber shell of the telescopic rod is installed. Second, as I have just mentioned, the circular column is flattened. The whole product was ruined directly. When we took the order in the exhibition hall for testing, we used a custom-made chalk clamp, which exerted some slight contact force to ensure the center of our chalk, and finally, to ensure that our pipe would not be deformed. For example, this is a sample cut out of some tails left by the customer at that time. We put it on a stand. It is a circular tube 0.2 mm thick and 45 mm in diameter. It can be used by GE, TS, GH, E22, and E35 to cut. One-time cutting, high speed, high precision, no burr, low cost, and can replace the saw cutting or stamping process. The application industry is generally in the hotel supply chains and fence making. This is a 25 mm diameter, 2 mm thick aluminum tube. Can be cut by GE, TS, GH, E22, E35. The same is a one-time cutting. Its application is mainly in some medical devices, medical beds, and wheelchair, sticks, and so on. This sample, it is a spring cut by a 40 mm round pipe. It can cut out the same width of every circle. Some of our customers even measured it one by one with a caliper. The width measured out are basically the same, reflecting the accuracy of our pipe cutting machine. This is our square pipe, stainless steel square pipe splicing process. It is cut by a pipe cutting machine and welded by a welding machine, two kinds of equipment cooperation. It can be applied to door handles or shower rooms and other industries. This is also a splicing process. This is a special shaped aluminum tube. It reflects the positioning accuracy because the position of its hole requires strict tolerance. It must be opened in these positions. So if our machine tool accuracy is not high, we cannot complete customers' proofing requirements. Currently, we use more and more aluminum tubes in the industry. This one looks more regular and more square. Other aluminum-shaped tubes look very strange. And inside aluminum profiles, many of them will have some reinforcing ribs. Therefore, its position will be relatively narrow. We are not sure if we can get in there. This type of aluminum profile is also the customer's material. They are mainly used in some buildings or cable group over cover products. It is a semicircular arc-shaped tube. Then let's take a look at some cutting samples of thick pipe. It is mainly used in mining machines and is very thick. The first step of the process is to use laser cutting to cut the material, and second is to use sheet metal forming to weld, and then carry out surface treatment and assembly of parts. The difficulties are the material is heavy duty. The second requires zero-till cutting. At present, in addition to TX65 Plus and TL500, the pipe we process is 100 kilograms or 200 kilograms. The tail material is basically in 130 or 180 millimeter, some even to more than 200 millimeter. This TX65 Plus was born to deal with the processing of this heavy-duty pipe. It can cut out diameter 325 millimeter round pipes, loading weight up to 500 kilograms. And we have TL500, the maximum bearing weight is 1.5 tons. What is the reason of our peers' failure? Firstly, equipment performance is insufficient. Tailing length is too long. Also, bearing is a problem. Because on the market, most of the pipe cutting machine load bearing are not particularly high, may only 100 kilogram to 200 kilogram. So this kind of tube is not easy to handle. This is a 6 millimeter carbon steel pipe, 100 by 80 carbon steel pipe cutting, mainly used in some fitness equipment as well as treadmill above. This is a 3 millimeter carbon steel waste pipe cutting. Like this, we are referred to as shipped pipe. This is still relatively normal. This is what we said, shipped pipe cutting. And this is a 14 millimeter thick carbon steel pipe, 76 millimeters in diameter, used primarily for oil pipelines or drill bits. Generally speaking, the thickness we can cut is based on the laser power. In general, this power can cut how thick plate, in theory, can cut how thick pipe. The normal thickness of the pipe wall is not too thick, not as thick as the plate. This is a channel steel, 80 by 40.5 millimeter. It can be cut by GE, TS, TH, E22, E35 laser, mainly used in construction machinery and steel structure industry. What are the difficulties in channel steel cutting? First, clamping problem. And second, the cutting technology. Although it says the wall thick is 5 millimeter, we can see that the thickest part of it can reach 10 millimeters. So in the cutting process, If we simply use a 5 mm cutting process to cut, it may not be cut through. So one-time cutting must be considered. Finally, we use the thickest 10 mm to set our parameter, and we'll use the 10 mm process to cut. This is an angle steel. Also can use GE sheet pipe machine, TS, TH, E22, E35 professional pipe cutting machine. It's also used in steel structures or construction machinery. It is an 8 mm carbon steel pipe bevel cutting process. The machine is using TP65S and TX65. These two machines carry out a bevel cutting. It mainly reflects our bevel cutting technology compared with TS65. What industry does the bevel cutting be mainly used in? Welding. When we normally cut, the edge is straight and vertical, so the welding only can do line and line. For example, the outside line and the outside line coincide. But with the bevel cutting process, it can do a joint between the surfaces. Relatively speaking, one of its strengths will be higher. This is an I-beam, also known as an universal beam, which can be cut with TP, TX, TS, and is also used in construction machinery and steel structure industry. Then let's talk about our sample frame. First, let's talk about the shape of our sample frame. The whole frame did not use a single screw or any welding process. It's all spliced together by mortise and tenon process. And it's very strong, and during transportation, it won't fall apart or fall off. And there are some samples on it, including carbon steel, stainless steel, aluminum, brass, and copper. Plate thicknesses is from 1 to 50 mm, and some pipe cutting uses almost all of our company's equipment, including GE, TS, TH, TX, E22, E35, GC, GA, GH, GV, and so on. It can be used in construction, furniture, kitchenware, machinery, steel construction, shelves, and so on. In order to make the shelves, we normally use these splicing techniques or welding, but this mainly reflects our mortise and tenon structure of our process. Like here, some stainless steel precision cutting samples are very thin, are from 0.5 mm to 1 mm. Cutting equipment is used GC, GA, GX, 3090 equipment for cutting. Its main feature is the accuracy, could reach 0.05 mm, and the effect is no burrs clean. Holes are extremely small and dense. What we required is no burns on the surface and no obvious deformation of the material. It is mainly used in industries including accessories, glasses, or bags, and advertising, logo, electronics, 3D, digital, and lighting. Here are some of our carbon steel precision cutting samples. The thickness is from 5 to 25 mm. They used GC, GA, GH, and GV cutting, mainly to show the thick plate cutting hole as well as the sharp angle of the process, because in certain conditions, the minimum hole we can cut is 1/3 of the thickness of a plate. But at present, we tell the customer it can cut, or is equivalent to the thickness of a piece of plate. But if the customer wants to see a smaller hole, we can do it, and it's used in sheet metal processing, auto parts, and high-end furniture and environmental machinery industries. This cabinet, then, is some of our thin tube precision cut out of samples. Materials are divided into carbon steel and stainless steel. Thickness is 1 millimeter size from 10 to 100 millimeters. And he uses these specialized pipe cutters like TH, TS, TX. It contains minimal tube of seamless cutting, mainly used in lighting, screens, furniture, and some of our medical equipment processing industry. Similarly, here we have the thin tube. It is a flat tube splicing screen. Requires the laser cutting the shape of a flat tube and bending line. Second is the pipe welding, splicing, surface treatment to a product. The pipe is 10 by 100 millimeter. Is a custom-made pipe. It is characterized by very soft. Because it is very flat and soft, the pipe is easy to shake when it is rotating, which might eventually cause the error of the bending line. Similarly, the customer originally used a sewing machine or punching machine to cut the material, which was less efficient. And then after tested various samples from different manufacturers, he traveled and went all the way from the north to the south in China, finally found the right equipment for testing. What was the reason for the failure? It has a low bending accuracy or misalignment of the dimensions, after which there is a gap or interference that cannot be successfully stitched together. And then we used a TS65 for testing, which uses an intelligent digital chuck. The middle support has a follow-up function which can reduce the sagging of our pipe when supporting the tube. After testing this batch of samples, the customer brought back another batch of the same pipe material. Perhaps the customer was worried about an accidental chance, so the customer brought back the same batch of pipe material for the second proofing. The final effect can meet the customer's requirements, so the customer finally bought our TS65 equipment. Here are some of our regular cutting samples. Because we said before, if the customer does not have special requirements, then we will cut square and circle. And here's some of effects that we cut. From 1 millimeter to 30 millimeter, their materials are divided into carbon steel, stainless steel, aluminum, brass, copper. All these, in fact, are normally cutting used to show customers. Bicycle frame. It is a stainless steel pipe. Stainless steel pipe thickness is 2 millimeter thick, diameter 50 millimeter. It is cut by TH, TS, TX professional pipe cutting machine. The product is integrated with the laser cutting, bending, welding into one, and then help customers to achieve flexible planning, production, tracking, and quality control, and ultimately to achieve intelligent and digital production. That's what we call an Industry 4.0. And then we're going to end up with this lesson for today. Thanks for your attention.